One sec. Let's go back to here for a second. Okay, right. Iris, over to you. Yep. You got it?
Yeah. Moses is taught the laws of the red heifer, whose ashes purify a person who has been contaminated by contact with a dead body. After 40 years of journeying through the desert, the people of Israel arrive in the wilderness of Zin. Miriam dies, and the people thirst for water. God tells Moses to speak to a rock and command it to give water. Moses gets angry at the rebellious Israelites and strikes the stone. Water issues forth, but Moses is told by God that neither he nor Aaron will enter the promised land.
Okay. Oh, there's more. Okay. Yep.
Aaron dies at Hor HaHar and is succeeded in the high priesthood by his son Eleazar. Venomous snakes attack the Israelite camp after yet another eruption of discontent in which the people speak against God and Moses. God tells Moses to place a brass serpent upon a high pole, and all who will gaze heavenward will be healed. The people sing a song in honor of the miraculous well that provided them water in the desert. Moses leads the people in battles against the Amorite kings, Sihon and Og, who seek to prevent Israel's passage through their territory, and conquers their lands, which lie east of the Jordan.
Okay, thank you. This is where the snake and the right they always have for medical, for like the NHS and the snake and the stick.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from, right? The serpent. Okay. So today we're going to talk about Miriam's passing.
Miriam, yeah.
Right. Now, so first source, before we get to that. Right, what happens? The people complain. We talked about this a few times recently, I think. There's no water, they're in the desert, they complain. Right? Moshe loses his cool. Right? He loses his cool. And he gets annoyed with them. We said this last week. And what does he say? I'll just read it. He says, "Listen, you rebels, shall we bring you water out of this rock?" And with that, he raised his hand and he struck the rock twice. And you recall from last week, we said that his mistake partly here is he says, "Shall we bring you water?" It's not we bringing the water, it's God bringing the water. Right? He took his eye off the ball because he was wound up. Well, that's what we assume. Right? Like when a child says, "I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored." Are we there yet? Are we there yet? When they get to about the 50th time, you're ready to explode and you have to contain yourself. When they get to the 100th time, you're like, you're losing the will to live, as they say, right? And it shapes your judgment. You can't think straight. And you often do things. I know I do it when my kids are being winding up, that afterwards I regret that I wasn't the adult in the room. So you've got Moshe and they're driving him crazy. And eventually he says, "Listen, you rebels, what do you think? We're going to bring you water out of this rock." And he hits the rock. Now, question which we may have addressed before. Did he sin?
In God's eyes, he did.
Right.
Well, God told him to speak to the rock, but he hit it instead.
What was the ultimate outcome of that?
Moses didn't go to Israel.
He didn't go into the promised land, right? And Joshua brought them into the promised land instead. So they had a new leader. And we've discussed that before as well, how Moshe's unfinished story of his life. And we learn from that that sometimes you don't finish the mission, but it's still valuable. Right. So in simple language, he didn't do what he was told and he was punished. Yes. But on a deeper level, clearly he wasn't destined to go into the promised land. So it worked out, Bashet, right? Aaron's sons, we've discussed that before, they both died. Was it for their sins? So seemingly, yes, it was that they either it says they got drunk or they brought the incense without permission. But on a deeper level, it says that we've discussed this before, their desire was to come close to God, and that's why they expired. So on a simple level, Moshe didn't listen to what he was told. On a deeper level, it plays out that he's the leader for the desert. He's not the leader to bring them into the promised land. And it works out that way. Just works out that way. In the desert, they needed a strong leader who could contend with them and with God. But when they get into the land of Israel, they need someone with a slightly different kind of focus, right? It's an interesting one. Did we discuss last week or the week before about Moshe being too much of a nanny, right? When he says to them, you know, what was it? Should I I carry these people in my bosom and I nuzzle, I nurse them. And we said Hashem never told him to do that. So brilliant leader, but because of the circumstances, he had to be very decisive and strong and so on. The next generation are going to have to build for themselves. So on a deeper level, Moshe is not the leader that brings them into the land of Israel. He's the leader that leads them in the desert. He does an amazing job, leads them out of Egypt into the desert. What does the Talmud say? Let's see who would like to read number 2. Brenda, you want to read?
Oh, I'll read it. The face of Moses was like the sun. The face of Joshua was like the moon.
Right. What does that actually mean?
Well, together, I suppose they make the universe.
So the simple meaning is that Yoshua reflected Moshe's light, right? He was a Talmud, he was a student. So he didn't have his own light, he reflected, like the moon reflects the light of the sun. I once had a comedy sketch, the sun and the moon are talking, and the moon says, "Sun, you know, you're cramping my style. Can you please move a bit further away from me so that I can shine on my own?" And the sun says, "There's a bit of a problem with that." Right? So the simple meaning of that is that Yoshua was reflecting Moshe's glory. But also, it's interesting. I lost a little bit of my hearing aid the other day, and it was nighttime, and the light was on, and I looked and I couldn't find it, and I thought, well, everybody knows that if you want to find chametz, you use a candle. So I switched off the main light, and I took out my phone, and I used the torch, and I found what I was looking for. It's much easier, actually, in darkness to see. When you have bright light, then your torch doesn't do anything to help you. So the Talmud says sunlight is so strong that there's no work for a candle. Whereas when you have the moon, then you need additional light. So it says Moshe was such a strong light, there was no room for anyone else. No one else had to shine, but he did the work for them. He carried them. Josh is like the moon, just like the moon. The moon gives you some light, but you still need a lamp or a candle or something. So the same metaphor that Moses is like the sun, he's so bright that all other light gets lost in him. Josh is like the moon, he's reflected light, and therefore there's room for other light as well. So other people can also be strong, can be a candle. Okay, fine, nice idea. But besides for that, why did Moshe lose control at this point? It's not the first time the people have wound him up. The people are always complaining, they're always fetching. Right? Why at this point did he lose control?
He'd just had enough.
So there are 2 other times this problem with water had occurred, okay? One was at Marah. We've missed some of that quote. That's a shame. Sorry. We've lost some of that quote. We've lost some of that quote. Who would like to read number 3? I'll have to put the end in for you. Sorry, we've lost the quote.
I'll read that.
Yeah.
They encamped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses. He gave water to drink, they said, and Moses replied to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you try Hashem?" Moses cried out to Hashem, saying, "What shall I do with this people? Before long they will be." Be what?
The death
Right.
of
So the
me,
rest
I
of it
think.
is before long.
The
Basically,
death of me.
he says they'll stone me. And what happens is Hashem says to him, strike the waters, and the waters became sweet instead of bitter. Sorry, this is the second one. The first one is at Marah, where the water was bitter, and Hashem made the water sweet. And the second one was at Rephidim, where there was no water at all, and Hashem said to him, strike the rock, and water will come out of the rock. Okay? What happened there? Right, that's the time 40 years earlier that Moshe says to people, why are you arguing with me? Why do you not trust Hashem? He turns to Hashem and says, what am I to do with these people? Before long they will be. This is the missing bit. They will stone me. So Hashem tells him, go to a rock in Chorev, take your staff and hit the rock. He did, and the water came out. So there was definitely tension and drama, but nothing like here, where he's he makes the mistake of saying, we can't bring water out for you. So the question is why? 40 years earlier, he was fine. Why now? And this is the other one. In the first month, the whole is sorry, right. So sorry, yeah. So why now? What was different now that he got wound up so easily?
It had
40
been
years
40
older.
years and they probably moaned and groaned all
Yes.
those 40 years. And he
Right.
just had enough. He couldn't bear it any longer.
Could be. Well, let's look at the theme of water. Right. Who else is on screen here? I don't know who else can see. Oh, you can't see. Lisa, you with us? Can you see the screen? Lisa,
Yeah.
would you like to
Sorry.
read number 4? Yeah, it's all right. Want to read number 4?
In the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. There, Miriam died and was buried. Now there was no water for the community.
Right. So here's the subtext. Here's the context to Moshe's frustration. Miriam has died, and in fact, as a result of her death, there's no water. What does that mean? Let's see, Rashi. Iris, would you like to read?
Rashi, since this statement follows immediately after the mention of Miriam's death, we may learn from it that during the entire 40 years, they had the well through Miriam's merit.
Right. Why? Because it says Miriam died and there was no more water. Oh, what's the connection? So the connection is that in her merit, they had a well and it dried up. So the water dries up because Miriam dies. Right. Miriam's well is a famous concept. Yeah, there's books called Miriam's Well and poems called Miriam's Well and things, Miriam's Tambourine, Miriam's Well. So who is Miriam? Who is she
Moses'
really?
sister,
Yeah, and what else?
a prophetess.
Yes, what did she do for him?
She was a midwife.
She's the one that saved him, right? She's the one that put him in the
Yeah,
river and waited.
she watched him over.
Right,
over
she
him
watched him, right?
while he was in the basket in the river.
Yep. Right. And she even suggested to Pharaoh's daughter that they get a Hebrew nursemaid, and then he was nursed by his mother, right? Yocheved. So she made sure that he had a connection to the family. She was a brilliant child. But
She must be a lot
go-
older than Moses.
know
How old
the-
was
yeah, I
she?
don't know
About
the time.
13, 14?
I don't know. I don't know the timescales. I'm not sure we're told. I'll ask ChatGPT. In the meantime, though, she did something that goes back way before that. Anyone know what that was?
Oh, she persuaded her parents to
To
come
have a
together
child.
again
Right.
and have children.
Yes. Right. Which was quite mature of her. Let's look at the quote. I'm just looking up her age here. We're back to Brenda. Would you like to read? Right. Pharaoh said he was going to kill all the male children, right?
Your degree, said Miriam, is worse than Pharaoh's. He only decreed against the males. You applied to females also. He intends to rob children of life in this world. You could deny them even life in the world to come.
Right. What was the context? You know, when people say, I can never bring a child into this world, it's such a cruel place. So
yeah.
Amram, who was actually a scholar, had said that because any children born, the male children will be murdered, that people should divorce their wives rather than, I guess they didn't have birth control in those days. People should divorce their wives rather than have children that will be killed. And Miriam says to him, you're worse than Pharaoh. Right? Imagine nowadays someone says you're worse than Hitler, right? You're worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh just wants to kill the boys. You are basically killing off everyone. And he said, you're right. And they reunited and they had children. Right. Miriam's age, according to ChatGPT. Moshe was the youngest. It's not mentioned explicitly. Aaron was older. Miriam was older still. So it says Moshe was 80 and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. There is a midrash that says she was 6 years older than Moshe. So according to that, she would have been about 6 when she hit him, which is pretty mature.
Yes.
Right. There you go. Okay. That's ChatGPT. It might be wrong. Sometimes is, often is actually. Right. So as a result of Miriam's actions, Moshe was born. A 6-year-old girl had more faith and wisdom than the leading rabbi of the generation. Yes? basically. Miriam's father was this great, Amram was this great, I mean, by the way, if they hadn't had more kids, they still would have had her. But anyway, they went on to have Moshe and Aaron. So this is the girl that's just died. According to our commentaries, our sources, Moshe wouldn't have been born without her actions. He wouldn't have grown up knowing his parents without her actions, and he wouldn't have survived without her actions. So she saved him by encouraging her parents to have more children. She saved him in the bulrushes, and she saved him by reuniting him with her parents, her mother, for nursing. So what a special person! What a great woman! And she's just died. That's got to be hard for him, right? Was she perfect?
No one's perfect.
Well, we know she wasn't. What did she do wrong?
She spoke slander about Moses and his
Yes.
Cushite wife.
Correct. Jeff, would you like to read? Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I don't have. Sorry, I've got
This
the
one?
wrong quote there. Yeah, here we go. Here.
Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had taken into his household as his wife. He took a Cushite woman.
Right. We don't hear much about Moshe's family. We've discussed this before, right? I don't know where it says it, but I don't know if they actually divorced, but it says he basically left his wife to go and be with God. Remember this? Right? He was so holy that he basically went on sort of strike. He left his wife. He was too busy talking to God, and they had shalom bayis problems. And I think it says that that certainly broke off marital relations. Whether he actually divorced her, I don't know. But basically, she wasn't happy that he spent too much time at work. We've mentioned this, I think, before. Yes, his work-life balance was off, as my wife just said. So there are those who say that when Miriam was critical, the actual criticism was that Moshe basically was spending less time with his wife, particularly the issue of giving her physical intimacy. Why? Because we know from the giving of the Torah, amongst other times, it says that in certain times of preparation, one of the things they would do is separate from their wives. I guess it was a distraction. If I'm not mistaken, the Olympic Village, they frown upon fraternization the night before a race or something because they say it distracts the athletes. Okay, lahavdil. So he was so busy with his spiritual realm that he had to be in a state of readiness for divine communication. He couldn't be basically intimate with his wife, and Miriam felt for her sister-in-law, and therefore and also she felt that she and Aaron had had messages from God, and they hadn't been told to leave their wives and to neglect their wives, and therefore she was basically speaking out so she wasn't just, they weren't just like, I said tongue-in-cheek the other week that they were being racist. Why? Because otherwise, why is it relevant that she was a Cushite woman? They started talking to Moses about his black wife. Okay, but that was just slightly tongue-in-cheek. But some of the commentaries say that, yes, she was punished for it because you shouldn't speak Lashon Hara, but intention was pure. She was saying to Moshe, you need to spend more time with your wife. That's what they were talking about. He had mistakenly got the idea that because he's a man of God, he has to spend all this time with God. I don't know if Hashem ever told him to go spend more time with his wife, but there we go. So there are different interpretations. He was busy with the community, right? You often find that. You have people who are communal leaders who don't have enough time for their spouses or their kids. So Moshe's lost his sister. He's lost someone who's watched over him as a child. He's lost over someone who supported him throughout the years and helped him in her own role as a leader. Okay? We all need strong female leaders, whether it's our wives or appropriate people. Let's see. This is from the book of Judges. This is Barak, not Barack Obama. It's different Barak. Speaking to Deborah. Who would like to read? Iris, I think we're back to you, number 9.
But Barak said to her, "If you will go with me, I will go. If not, I will not go."
Now, they weren't as close as Moshe and Miriam. But nonetheless, Barak was a judge, right? And he said, I can't do this without you. So you have Moshe who's lost his right-hand woman in essence, right? We hear a lot about Aaron. We don't hear as much about Miriam, but Miriam is a central figure in his life, right? He owes his very life to her, and he's just lost her. And what happens when you're in grief?
You don't always make the right judgment.
Right. And also, if you're a prophet, it could be that we know that at times when Moshe was angry or when he was emotional, he lost his way. So, for example, when the daughters of Tzalacha came to him, right? And they said, you got it wrong, basically, and they corrected him, right? Why did he not know the answer? Because he was, at the time, it says he was angry, I think from the calf, wasn't it? So, he's a human being, right? There's another example, right? Presumably, all our forefathers had some degree of prophecy. Jacob would have been a prophet. How did he know that? How could he not sense or know that Joseph was alive? And the simple answer is that he was mourning him. He was so consumed by grief that he didn't pick up the messages. So you have Moshe, the greatest of all prophets. Shem tells him to speak to the rock, and somehow, in his grief, he doesn't quite get it right. It's just a suggestion. He struck the rock. He said "we" instead of God. He lost his temper. He called them rebels. We all know grief does strange things to people. Right? If anyone's ever seen a broigus, a levaya, or a shiva, it's horrible. You know, it brings out the worst in people, because when people are bereaved and they have grief, they express themselves in different ways. Here's Moshe. He's lost his sister. He's lost his female role model. They've lost the source of water. The people have lost this leader who led them in song, this woman who intervened with his marriage to try to protect, someone in whose merit there was water in a desert. So what does he do? He does what other people do when they're bereaved. Right? He lashes out. Let's see what Rabbi Sachs has to say. We're Miss Julian. He reads Rabbi Sachs normally. Who would like to read Rabbi Sachs? Lisa, would you like to read Rabbi Sachs?
I'll read again if you like. The story of the moment Moses lost his confidence and calm is ultimately less about leadership and crisis, or about a staff and a rock, than about a great Jewish woman, Miriam, appreciated fully only when she was no longer there.
I don't know. Did he not appreciate her in her lifetime? I don't know the answer to that. But you know, it's there's a phrase in Hebrew, we lament for those who are lost. That we basically, you only feel it after you lose a person. You realize how great they were. So this is Rabbi Sachs' interpretation. A lot of people get very upset when people say that, you know, David HaMelech, King Saul had you know, manic depression, or you know, Moshe got angry and he lost his cool. But the fact is that that's what we're told in the Torah. This is Rabbi Sachs' suggestion. If you look at the timing of it, like, why is it any different from the other times that there was no water and the people complained and he was much calmer? And the answer is because he just lost his sister. His sister was such a central part of his life. And that's why you need strong female leadership. And he was lost briefly without her. There you go. That's Rabbi Sachs' theory. Not just Rabbi Sachs' theory. It's mentioned in a few places as well. Any thoughts, questions?
Well, the only thought I had with Moses losing his calm in those days, of course, there was no what do you call it?
Anger management.
Yes, no, and also, how did he know about being a leadership? He didn't have any seminars or
Yeah,
anything
that's
that
true. And
go
he
to.
didn't. Who would have been his model? You're right. Joshua had a model. He had Moshe as his model. Moshe had to find his own
Yeah,
way, though Hashem guided him extensively. But yes, you're
yeah,
right.
yeah, but he did very well, Moshe,
He did okay. Yeah.
even without all
There we
that,
go.
all of these.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm losing my. I think it's
No,
hot, and I'm losing my thoughts from
no, that's very
my
good. Thank you.
words.
Did Mordechai make it back to Israel?
Yesterday.